Calling for the Prime Minister to go, thousands have gathered in the Armenian capital for a protest and to launch a nationwide strike, a demonstration of anger against the peace deal that was signed with Azerbaijan to end fighting in the disputed region of Nagorno-Karabakh. We can speak now to researcher, to founder of the Armenian Peace Initiative, an apolitical organisation that wants to raise awareness of the violence being used in the region, and also someone who used to work with the Armenian Defence Ministry, Ms. Taline Papzian. Thanks so much for your time and bringing us your insight into the situation. Can I start by asking you, these protests that continue, the anger that is still on the streets of Armenia, how significant do you think that is? How strong is the opposition, and should the Prime Minister resign?
Well, that's the whole question, and that is also why the opposition has called for a general strike for today, with the purpose of showing that they are able to actually mobilize great numbers of followers, which so far has not been so much the case. I mean, a few thousands people, but not many more. Whereas the actual discontent of the society is obviously a lot higher than these numbers in the streets. So that's one of the purpose of the general strike called on for today. And should the Prime Minister resign? I think the real debate should not be about the resignation. It should be about how do we organize and make sure that the outcome of the crisis remains constitutional, and that we set up the right mechanisms to provide for early elections and eventually resignation, yes, but not resignation as a goal per se, but taken in a legal and democratic setting.
This peace deal that was signed in order to end the weeks of fighting, how has that left security in that region?
You mean in Armenia or in Karabakh?
In both, but perhaps starting with the direct region and Armenians living there, and then indeed the wider implication.
Okay, so first let me correct. It's not a peace deal, it's a truce. It's the end of hostilities in the Karabakh region. And actually it's a question, are the hostilities really halted, frozen for good? We have seen, for example, last week that 2 villages were seized by Azerbaijani forces during the weekend. So 2 villages that are on the new line of contact between the Armenian forces and the Azerbaijani forces. And in these 2 villages, there were no Russian peacekeepers or forces of opposition, and so that military move actually took place a few days ago. So your question is absolutely essential. People in Karabakh, as far as the new line of contact goes, obviously don't feel safe now. So that's part of the crisis that Armenia is experiencing. And there are also regions in Armenia per se where the question of security and the safety of the people is now very acute. And one of those regions is the southernmost region, which is at the border between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and in fact is also a new line of contact between forces that are not fighting, but that are adverse forces.
So I imagine, scores of families left in limbo, really, at the current situation. Where do you think the solution is? I mean, you mentioned there the Russian peacekeepers. We were being told that there would also be Turkish peacekeepers. What needs to be done, though, so that it works for both sides?
Okay, so first, regarding the Turkish peacekeepers, they will not be posted in Karabakh per se. So there is, from what we understand, an agreement between Russia and Turkey to create a sort of a conjoint or common, maybe military base, maybe observation center, but not in Karabakh, somewhere in Azerbaijan. The Russian peacekeepers do have a huge mandate, and they are actually deploying many huge resources in order to make sure that some sort of stability is recovered by Karabakh, also by Armenia and by Azerbaijan. Russia needs that for the whole region. And now the whole question remains if and when something happens, because in the present situation, things will happen necessarily. What is going to be the Russian reaction, and to what extent are they ready to engage the lives of their peacekeepers, of their own soldiers, to ensure the security provisions that are supposed to be part of the truce signed in November.
And just very finally, Ms. Taline Papzian, the opposition we're seeing in Armenia, will that stay in Yerevan, or is that moving towards that disputed region between the two countries?
No, so far I am not seeing signs of a moving in the region. The opposition in Armenia has a very big problem, is that widely it is not perceived as a legitimate opposition. It is perceived as mainly forces that are linked to the previous regime. And unfortunately, the government's response has not been adequate so far, because it has sort of put itself hostage to an endless debate between the two sides. And now we really need a third force, a third movement, probably coming from civil society and having with it many professionals and experts in various fields that Armenia needs now, that would be apolitical and that would be able to offer a sort of a way out of the crisis.
Okay, Ms. Taline Papzian of the Armenia Peace Institute, thank you so much for joining us and bringing us your perspective on the situation.